It was Shakespeare who penned the phrase, "What's in a name?" And Simon Peter, for him, having that name, Simon and Peter, and seeing how it's used throughout the gospel text is intriguing, and it helps us spiritually. But there's also some apologetic aspects to a name, particularly the names of the apostles.
Simon is an interesting name that has apologetic significance. You might ask, how does a name like Simon give us any confidence that the Bible is reliable? Well, have you ever noticed that when you read the New Testament, a lot of Simons are mentioned, actually 9 to be exact. And almost every time the name Simon is mentioned, you see they put a qualifier on it, something to identify and distinguish this Simon from another Simon. So for example, we got Simon, who is called Peter. You have Simon the Zealot. You have Simon the leper, Simon of Cyrene, who carries the cross for Jesus Christ. Simon Iscariot, Judas's father. Simon the tanner, as mentioned in Acts. Then you have Jesus' brother named Simon. Now, do you know why the gospel writers will put these identifiers on all these Simons? It's because Simon was the most commonly used name in first century Palestine. You see, in 2002, there's a Hebrew scholar named Tala Lan, and what she did was she scoured through over 3,000 sources of archaeology, inscriptions, and manuscripts, and she compiled a list of the most commonly used names in first century Palestine. And when we compare that list to the New Testament, we see that Simon is the #1 most frequently used name. So it makes sense that they would put an identifier on Simon. Now, did the gospel writers just get lucky with Simon? Was Simon just a well-known name throughout all of the Roman Empire? Well, if we just use the apostles' names in Matthew 10, we see that the gospel writers know exactly when to put an identifier on the name because of how popular it is in society and when not to. So if we take James, we get James, son of Zebedee, and then James, son of Alphaeus. Well, James is the 11th most used name within first century Palestine. So the gospel writers know to put an identifier on it. You got Matthew, the tax collector. Well, Matthew is the 9th most commonly used name. You got and his brother John. John is number 5 on the list. Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed Jesus. Well, Judas is the 4th most commonly used name in first century Palestine, according to all the ancient records. Now, the gospel writers also know when not to put an identifier. So you got names like Philip. Well, Philip is number 61 on the list. Bartholomew, number 50 on the list. You have Thomas, which is 100 plus on the list. And Thaddeus, just plain old Thaddeus. That's number 39 on the list. So not only do the gospel writers know when to put an identifier to distinguish a name based off its popularity within first century Palestine, it knows when not to do it.